new season, brand new dawn for Fox. And it's lights out and away we go.
Simply lovely.
I was really enjoying that last in.
Las Vegas.
What was that? What in the Hunger Games was that opening ceremony? I'm going to have to agree with Max on this one. There was too much of a show this weekend, and it was not enough about the racing at all. The FIA put their eggs in the wrong basket, let's be honest. And I think the only way we can start off this episode is to talk about Great Gate. How the track was only signed off on the day of free practice is beyond me, and how it still managed to fail within 9 minutes of cars being on track. The whole of Thursday was a disaster. To not have grates secured properly with cars travelling at 200 kilometers an hour down that piece of road, just in general around the track, and to have that sort of, why was it not secured properly in the first place? The track itself I thought to be quite dangerous in certain pieces. Bumps on the track, you've got grates coming off, pit exit. I don't think it was well thought out. And then to only have compliance sign off on the day the Grand Prix starts to then fail within 9 minutes. Extensive damage to Carlos's car. Him losing feeling in his legs because of the impact. It's just... And then him sustaining a penalty for that damage. It's just... What was that? Honestly, in this instance, the FIA were bigger clowns than the Ferrari strategists. And that is a hard thing to do. That is a very, very hard thing to do. To only have 9 minutes of running, cancel the session, which I fully agree with. It wasn't safe. I don't want drivers on track if it is not safe, but they shouldn't have been out there in the first place if the track wasn't safe. Fully on board with the delays. Yes, they're an inconvenience, but they were needed to make the track safe. What I do not agree with is kicking fans out who have spent their money, who have travelled both domestically and internationally, and who have waited until 2 o'clock, 2:15 in the morning to see cars on track. May have only had a single day pass. They couldn't be there for FP3 in quali or the race day, so they wanted to be there for that one day to be kicked out and offered measly, pathetic amounts of compensation for that, because event organisers and the FIA and compliance officers failed to do their jobs. And I 100% fully support the class action lawsuit that they are embarking on. They deserve more compensation from F1 than what they've been given. A $200 merchandise voucher isn't going to cut it when you've spent thousands of dollars on overpriced tickets, travel and accommodation to be there for 9 minutes of racing. Not even racing, just 9 minutes of cars on track. It's just, it blows my mind how they have not done more, like honestly. But my rant on that is over for now. There will be more on it, I'm sure, as the lawsuit progresses. I do think that going into next year, track layout needs to change. The bump and the grates obviously need to be addressed. The pit exit, while it didn't come out to be an issue, I still think could be in a safer place, not actually in turn one. They've got that many straights and they put it there. But anyway, the other controversy to come out of this weekend, Mercedes against Ferrari for that penalty. And look, it's on brand for Mercedes and Toto, but it was very harsh and uncalled for. That penalty for Carlos Sainz should not have been given, because had that grate been secured properly and not impacted his floor and damaged mechanical components of his car, he would not have had to take those new parts, and therefore would not have otherwise sustained a penalty. So the fact that the FIA enforced that, despite 8 out of 9 remaining teams saying that's a bit harsh. Like, you've got Red Bull going, no, that's a bit harsh. It should have been taken into consideration. And, you know, can't change the rules, nothing in the provision. There was enough time between the conclusion of FP1 after 9 minutes and the start of FP2 at 2:30 in the morning Vegas time for the FIA to convene the emergency meeting that they said that they shouldn't call, and may have an exception made, because this was in no fault Ferrari or Carlos Sainz's fault. They should not have been penalised for it. And I fully once again agree with Max in that if the roles had been reversed and it had been a Mercedes car that had been impacted, and Toto would have changed his tune completely. He would not have had the opinion that he did. And it's just, I get it. There's a whole lot, and I'll dive into it later. But it's just, it was unfair. let's be honest. That should not have happened to start with, and the penalty should not have been given. But let's get into the team breakdown. As always, we start with Red Bull. Max was on an actual rampage. He ran Charles wide in turn 1. He had that incident with Ocon in turn 1 in qualifying, and he had a crash with George. Like, otherwise it was just a standard week for Max. I did like his little radio message when he got his 5-second penalty for running Charles wide in turn 1 and not giving the place back, as he should have. And I do think he should have given that place back. But I have seen that he has apparently had a word with Charles, and they have apologised. He's apologised to him. They've sorted it out. But Checo had a bit of a dodgy qualifying, but he made up for it during the race. But he was once again overtaken for a podium position on the final lap. But he managed to keep third this week. So, I mean, he came away with something. But I think it's safe to say that the general consensus from Max was that the weekend was too much showboating and not enough about the racing. But he did change his tune post-race. But I have a feeling that was due to some heavy PR training and a little bit of a reminder from Red Bull, F1 and the event organisers to just tone it down, be on board, and also because he won. So, and it seemed like they had a great time with the racing. The racing itself, it was a good race. I can't fault the race. It's just everything around it wasn't great. But Checo did manage to secure P2 in the championship this weekend, outscoring Lewis Hamilton by the 6 or more points that he needed. So congrats to Checo and congrats to Red Bull for securing the 1-2. Now Mercedes, as Alison and I predicted in our Las Vegas preview, if you haven't watched it, go check it out and then come back. It was an average weekend. Average weekend all around. Lewis was knocked out in Q2. George managed a P4 start, but both struggled in the race with their tyre temps and their grip. They managed P10 finishes, but nothing great. Hamilton did lose out on P2 in the championship because of their average weekend, and he did not score enough points to keep the competition alive with Perez. But that was expected when you start P12. Toto. He was the only team principal who wanted to enforce the penalty. And while it is unfair, I also see Toto's side of it, in that it's part of the sport. He's CEO, part owner, and team principal of Mercedes, and he's advocating for what's best for his team in order to secure the best finish possible. I mean, after all, there are millions, literal millions of dollars between finishing P2 and P3 in the Constructors' Championship. But the fact that he had to resort to enforcing a penalty that would give Carlos a 10-place grid penalty reflects the fact that he has such little confidence in the car and a lack of belief overall that they could beat them on track where it matters. They couldn't outrace them. They were unable to earn the points themselves. He fundamentally didn't believe that the Mercedes was going to be quicker and have a better race car than Ferrari on the day. I mean, this was reflected in the race. I mean, given Carlos, even with his 10-place grid penalty, he started 12th. Lewis started, 13th something. Sainz still managed to finish higher than both Mercedes cars, even with the penalty. He finished P6, while George and Lewis finished P7 and P8. Take of that what you will. Ferrari. To be honest, Great Gate ruined their weekend. It ruined a lot of people's weekend, but I think it ruined Ferrari's the most. They had the possibility of having such a strong weekend. Charles secured P1, and if not for the penalty and for the new parts that would otherwise not have been needed, Carlos was on for a P2. He qualified P2. An overall front row lockout, but to stop dwelling on the negative, the good signs, the positive to take away from it is that Charles was able to beat a Red Bull on sheer pace alone. He managed to overtake Checo twice with slipstreams and DRS. Yes, he couldn't overtake Max, but the difference in setup between the two cars is what came down to it. And it does show that Ferrari did have the edge going into this weekend. Ferrari, they played with their rear wing, and it wasn't working for Max in qualifying. And it wasn't working for him in free practice, and he changed it for qualifying. And it paid dividends in the race. And so it's the same for Charles. But he was let down by the team, once again, with shitty strategy when it comes to safety cars. Shitty strategy. Again, to be honest, they probably should have boxed Charles under that safety car for new tyres. Max did him a solid there, colliding with George. He should have pitted for those new tyres. Probably would have allowed him to overtake Checo a few laps sooner. Maybe would have even allowed him to go on and catch Max out front. Not saying it would have, but the likelihood was significantly increased. But both drivers managed their tyres well and it was a great recovery drive for Carlos. And both managed to secure a great point haul, seeing them only 4 points behind Mercedes going into the final race of the season. So overall, positives to take away from it, but the negatives are the elephant in the room, let's be honest. McLaren. This one hurt. This one cut me deep. It was a shit weekend all round. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The team going into it said that they didn't think the track would suit them this weekend, but there were some promising signs throughout practice. Both car drivers managed to put in some competitive lap times, not consistently, but they were there. The race. Horror race for Lan. Lap 4 crash. And I actually don't think I breathed until he was confirmed okay and out of hospital. Like that was a long night. Apparently, according to Oscar and his engineer, there was a bump on track which caused him to bottom out, lose control of the car. And it was definitely not the birthday present that he was hoping for. Prior to that, he showed good pace. He was making his way through the field. So it was quite unfortunate. But on to the positives. Oscar. He had a mega drive. Went from P19 to P3 at one point. And I was like, please just, if he'd swapped tyres sooner, could have stayed on for a P3. If he'd done both compounds earlier, could have stayed on for a P3. But he did finish P10 due to having to change tyres again. And he managed to snag fastest lap point. So walking away with 2 points at the end of the day isn't bad, despite the weekend that they thought they were going to have, and that they did to some extent. It's a race that I think they will take a lot away from and will improve on for next year. But I think the biggest issue for them, as well as a lot of other teams, was the grip levels and turning the tyres on to the optimum point. They did have a decent straight line speed, especially in the clear when they got clear running. But it just wasn't their weekend. But overall, glad Lando's okay. Glad the team got some points. And on to the final race of the season. Aston Martin. Alonso, he had a rough race. He had a rough start to the race, spinning out turn 1 of lap 1, likely due to cold tyres and no grip and just dodgy track layout. But it was an average quali for both drivers, but it was a well-improved performance from Lance. I mean, he qualified P14, Alonso qualified P10. Overall, not bad. But the standout this weekend in Aston Martin was not the Spaniard. It was not Fernando Alonso. It was the Canadian heir in Lance Stroll. I guess the weird goatee that he had this weekend must be working for him, because the man managed to go from P14 to P5. Where has that come from? Honestly, where has that performance come from? I mean, good on him, but it's just, where has this been all season? And Alonso, well, he started P10 and he only managed to finish P9. But still, it was a decent points haul, keeping the team in the fight with McLaren and, overall heading into Abu Dhabi. So, positive signs. It appears that taking the upgrades off the car is working for them. Alpine. The infighting continues, despite the team's best efforts to make it seem like Pierre and Esteban are the best of pals. I mean, both drivers ignored team orders to hold position and continued to fight amongst themselves, which ultimately was probably a likely contributing factor in Gasly's downfall at the end of the race when he sustained significant graining and loss of grip. To run that close behind your teammate in hot air for a significant period of time is going to have some consequences. But it was a decent quality from Gasly, coming in at P5, finishing the race in P11, and overall probably not the way they would have hoped that the day would go for him. Ocon, reverse of Gasly. He had a crappy quali coming in at P16, but managed to claw his way back for a P4 finish. So very contrasting races for the Frenchman. But the tension and the competitiveness between the two drivers is something that I think the team will definitely need to address going into next season, and that I'm sure their new sponsors would want them to remedy, given the issues that it has caused them throughout the year and the incidents between both drivers throughout the season. Williams. Where has this performance been hiding? They went absolute beast mode this weekend. Logan coming in P3 in practice. Where did that come from? Both drivers through to Q3 for the second time this season and secured a third row lockout with a P6 and P7, with Logan almost out qualifying Albon for the first time ever. The qualifying and the one lap pace was much improved. However, they still lacked that race pace, given both drivers lost a fair few places. Alex finishing in P12 and Logan in P17. So no points all to help them out in their constructors battle with AlphaTauri. But overall, positive signs. I have no idea where that performance came from, and I'm not mad about it in the slightest. I wish they put in more performances like that. But anywho, on to AlphaTauri. It was a rough weekend for the Red Bull Junior team. It really was. I mean, Danny, He made it through to Q2, qualified P15, not bad. Yuki couldn't get the car off the bottom of the grid, qualifying P20. He was definitely not happy about it. The race wasn't much better for them. Danny managed to hold out for a P14 finish, and Yuki only managed to make up 2 spots for P18 before DNFing with a mechanical issue. So, great. Not great there for Yuki. And with 1 race left in the season, I think they will be very glad to see the back of this car, and hello to the Red Bull reject that they're getting from this season to bring them into the fight next season. Because they're both quite capable drivers, and with a decent quality car, they both have the potential to be up there, getting points every weekend. Maybe not on the podium, but they have the potential to be up there. And Alfa Romeo, it was a typical weekend for them. The only difference really being is that Bottas managed to qualify P8, but Zhou once again managed a typical Q1 exit and a P18 start. But throughout the course of the race, Valtteri lost 9 places, finishing P17, but Zhou made up 3 spots for a P15 spot. Once again, no points. Their performance just isn't there. The car is lacking in many aspects. They're in 9th for a reason. They're not out here making waves. And I don't foresee them improving this week in Abu Dhabi. And I unfortunately don't see them improving next season. I hope they do. More competitors, the better. But I don't foresee it happening, realistically. Haas. This was a very rare occasion where K-Mag managed to out-qualify Hulk. I think it was only the 3rd time this season, coming in at P9 and P13 respectively. But neither managed a points finish. K-Mag got P13 and it was a P19 and a DNF for Hulk. Again, they made no inroads in their championship. While I had hopes for Haas earlier in the season in that they may not finish last in the Constructors this year, I think it's pretty clear that they're going to finish last this year. They're not going to improve. They need a miracle. They actually need a miracle in order to score enough points to not finish last. For a while there, it did look like AlphaTauri was going to claim that bottom spot. Thank you, Nick de Vries. But Danny, he's come in and saved the team. And in doing so, he has crushed the dreams of Haas. And Haas supporters everywhere. But, I think this is karma. This is karma for how they treated little Mickey Schumacher. You get what you deserve, let's be honest. But anyway, hopefully, I think Abu Dhabi is going to be a bit of fun. There's lots to play for. Check out my Abu Dhabi preview coming soon. But there's going to be a lot to play for. I won't do my predictions now, but I need to stop talking about Vegas before I get too mad. But thank you for joining me this week in a Hunger Games-esque race, I guess. But anyway, thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, review, all of the above. And I will see you in my Abu Dhabi preview. And then next week for our final review of the season. What am I going to do with my life after that? I have no idea, but we'll see. Until next time, friends.